Hey everybody, I'm Wayne D. Kramer. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I am here for a live Q&A session. I've got lots of great questions here. I'm going to go through about my new book, Heroes of Time Legends, Murdoch's Choice. It's a fantasy adventure story, action adventure story with a seafaring theme, and it's the first novel of the Heroes of Time series. So we're going to go through that, and I think I should explain my background a little bit. I've got some Legos. I'm a fairly avid Star Wars Lego collector. You can see a lot of them are still in the box, so I just don't even have room to put them all, to be honest with you. As soon as I get more room, I'll be building a lot of Lego sets, but I probably got about 70 sets so far, and I find those to be a lot of fun. So first of all, I would like to just thank Authors in Focus and Michael Evan and this group, Fantasy Sci-Fi Focus, for hosting me on this Q&A session today. Should be a little bit of fun. I guess a real quick thing about me. I've wanted to be a fantasy author for a very long time. It took me a good 20, more than 20 years to finally make the leap into doing it as a serious endeavor. And I had originally started writing stories back in middle school, high school. I did this just for fun. It's something that I just always loved doing, expressing myself in writing. And for a long time, I was writing in a video game novelization project called Chrono Trigger, which some of you may have heard of. And I always wanted to novelize the story of that game. So I spent many years developing my writing on that story. And eventually decided, I wanted to get next level with this, do something that I could actually publish without red tape, and decided to pursue my own series. So for a good long while, I spent some time world building this thing. I spent about 3 years doing world building and just setting up the Heroes of Time series. And I actually started, for the first 3.5 years, writing a book called Heroes of Time, the First Ethereal, which is not the first book that I published, but I wrote that one as a big epic fantasy. It's over 220,000 words. And that one is kind of for later on. It's another entry point into the series. And this book, Murdoch's Choice, is also an entry point into the series. So we're going to have a couple of different entry points into the series. This one's kind of your faster-paced adventure story. It'll probably be, I would say, a 3-book series on Murdoch. And then at some point here, we'll eventually get to the main series. All right, so to get to the actual questions here, I've got them right next to me. First one, tell us about the first project you worked on when you knew you wanted to be a writer. Okay, so going back to the Chrono Trigger novelization I mentioned, that was probably my first it was the first thing I got really serious about in terms of wanting to be a writer. I had hoped to publish that, honestly, and there's still some hope in that. To publish that Chrono Trigger novelization. Obviously, there's a lot of red tape around IP rights and that sort of thing. But, what I did with it was not just rewrite the video game, but I was retelling the story in an epic fantasy format. And I developed my writing over just many years of writing, and then back and forth with readers, critiquing it, and just honing my craft with that. And that's, I was writing before Chrono Trigger, but that's when I got particularly serious about it. By the way, before I get to the next question, I meant to mention earlier, here at the end, I'm going to try, if I have some time, I'll try to leave some time for a quick reading of part of my in-world holiday tale, The Gift of Candletide. So if you want to stick around for that, or stick around in the video for that. All right, so next question here. Do you have a favorite character to write? So, I don't know. That's not a strong favorite. I love getting into different characters' heads. Zale in this novel is very special to me because that character is based actually on a real life person in my life. And before this book, I really never endeavored to make characters based on real life people. But this one I did because this person, his name is Skip, Daniel Skip Person, and he was a colleague, friend, family member, really funny, interesting guy, just kind of a larger than life personality. And he and I worked together, right? He worked for me in my business. And we would often, for a good while, I was planning the Heroes of Time series, and I would talk to him about that. And I had determined I wanted to make a character off of him right then. And we had talked about it. We would brainstorm this character, and he told me he wanted to be a sea captain, and so, all right, I fashioned a character around that, and he became part of my world building, a few years ago. Unfortunately, he passed away actually 3 years ago today. Today is that day, and this is actually the reason for our raffle. It's honoring Skip Person, who passed away on December 20th, 2018. And that is a character that is fun for me to get into because it helps me remember. I get to remember him as a person, so it's a unique character. It's a very different character than most people get to write. And getting inside his head is very interesting because he's so cerebral, and he's got so many fun sayings, and he makes nicknames for people that make no sense. And that's all kind of reflected in this book and in this part of the series. Otherwise, I actually kind of enjoy writing a strong female lead as well. In my other book that I mentioned, The First Ethereal, has a fairly strong female lead named Etna. And I actually have a fairly easy time dealing with that, and I feel like that character comes naturally to me. She's just a strong-willed, very capable person, and I enjoy writing her as well. Okay, next question here. Has a character ever surprised you? And maybe you thought they were one way, but they turned out to be completely different. Can you tell us about this experience? Generally speaking, I do try to plot what's going on and plan what's going on in my stories, and I try not to be too surprised. But I have found that it is the nature of the craft and of being, kind of part plotter, part pantser, that things do change that you don't expect, and the characters really do kind of get a mind of their own, and they really do kind of go on a path of their own. And I have definitely, I'm not sure that I've had too many surprises where a character was like totally different than I expected them to be, but they have gone in different directions. Different things have happened in the plot that I didn't expect to have happen. Somebody had a really big life-changing issue, experience, major injury. They lose a hand or something, and that maybe wasn't something I planned until I just straight up wrote it. And things like that have definitely happened. I've even had a character die before, or get seriously injured that I had not previously planned for that to happen. It just seemed to fit the story, and that's just where the story was going at that time. So it really does take a life of its own. And if you're not a writer, I'm not sure how much sense that'll make to you, but maybe that seems strange, but it's really true. It really does take a life of its own as you go. What do you do when you're not motivated to write? So I'm pretty much always motivated. My biggest issue is distraction. Distraction from really not silly things. I don't really spend a lot of time playing video games or watching TV that much. I get distracted by just the other things going on, mostly professionally, to be honest, because I have another business that I have to take care of. So that's kind of my normal day-to-day work, and that is very demanding, and that just takes away from my writing time sometimes. If something happens in life that's a little bit stressful, that can definitely affect your ability to get in the right mindset for writing, and maybe won't be as productive in that case. I've also found that since publishing my first novel, there is a lot more distraction that comes from just trying to do the marketing, just trying to get just trying to get out there and get the book noticed. It takes a lot of time and energy, and that's been an interesting one to adjust to as well. Okay, so how do you balance writing, reading, family, and a job if you're working? Okay, well, I just mentioned the job part. To balance all these things is a challenge, but I think the most effective way that I've found to do that is mostly by taking different sections of the day. I won't call it block scheduling, as I'm not really that rigid, but kind of knowing that different parts of the day are for different things. So usually for me, a normal work day will go beginning part morning through lunch, and a little after lunch will be mostly focused on business items for my other company, and also some things for my author business, and then some things and then in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, I usually will change out my setting. I'll leave my home office and I'll go to a coffee shop just to change environments, and that's where I try to focus on actually writing, or at least plotting or planning or outlining whatever it is I'm working on. Like right now I'm working on the sequel to Murdoch's Choice, and that's what I try to work on when I have that time of the day. Then more family time happens after that. I'm home by supper. We have some time with the family then, through bedtime with the kids. I always read to the kids at night. We spend 30, 40, 50 minutes every single night reading before the kids go to bed, which I think is really important, and I think is a very special time for all of us. And then after that, once everybody in the house has crashed, is usually when I get to catch up on other things. I might do some more writing. I might catch up on some business stuff, some accounting things, just whatever. Or sometimes I'll chill and just watch some videos or some news clips and try to catch up on things. Do you write stories with an audience in mind? I didn't used to so much. I originally started this series just thinking this was going to be like an adult fantasy series to the tune of Tolkien or George Martin or whatever, when I was really doing my epic fantasy part of this. As I got through publishing this first book, this Murdoch's Choice book, I did kind of realize that what I was writing here was resonating with a slightly younger audience than I maybe originally intended, with teens and up, young adult and up. So young adult, new adult, and adults have found this book enjoyable. And so at least in this Murdoch's Choice part of the series, or this Murdoch portion of the series, I do keep in mind that I'm writing to perhaps a teenage plus audience with these books, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. There is another project I'm working on that's Penny Pangolin, and that's going to be a children's book series, and so that obviously is a specific audience for kids. Those are picture books. I have a great illustrator on board working with me on that, and that'll be coming down the road. All right, so how do you navigate the dilemma of writing characters of a different gender than your own? I touched on this maybe briefly earlier. I, first off, don't really consider it a dilemma to write characters of a different gender. Female, male characters, both, for me, are easy to write. I don't feel like I have an issue with that. I've dealt with lots of people in my time as a business owner so for instance, lots of women, lots of females who I've worked with that have had different personalities all across the spectrum. And also I have 4 daughters, so writing female characters is not really that intimidating to me, to be honest, and not a dilemma, so it's no problem there. What made you realize you wanted to be an author, specifically fantasy, sci-fi author? Okay, so this just, a lot of it's natural. It just is something that I have gravitated toward naturally since I was a kid. I would write short stories. I would enter the Young Authors Contest back in school, and I would just like to express myself in the written word. Even notes to my parents. I would write large notes if I was if I had some kind of issue going on with my dad or it was usually dad, I think, I would write a big letter and put it under their door. I would write big emails later in life to express whatever I was doing. So writing is just a very comfortable way of expressing myself and doing it thoroughly. And then it just developed, the creative writing side really developed a lot as I was working on my Chrono Trigger novelization and trying to do something with that and honing my craft around that. So as far as specifically fantasy sci-fi, that is fantasy specifically. I just love the immersion of a different world, of a world that you make up. Obviously, it can be done well and can be done not so well, but it's when it's done well, it's just a lot of fun to immerse yourself in that world and to see what's happening with those characters, and to kind of have a world that's separated from some of the issues and the not so fun sides of maybe the real world. So I've just always enjoyed that. So fantasy is definitely what I write more of. I mean, sci-fi interests me as well, but I'm definitely more in the epic fantasy camp. And I like to pace things that way. I like the kind of pacing and writing that I do. That's just, I think it just more is fitting to the fantasy genre. All right, so Tolkien, Martin, Rowling, all revolutionized what we thought was possible and what became mainstream. Is moving the industry something you're interested in? And if so, in what direction? Moving the industry. So I would love my books to be earth-shattering in that they're so big and popular that everybody's buying it and everybody's talking about it. I mean, look, everybody'd love to be the next Tolkien or Martin or Rowling, right? I'd love this to be the next Harry Potter series with movies and all that good stuff. But am I looking to change the industry? No, I don't think so. I'm just looking to be another great tale, another great series in the realm of fantasy. Not that I'm trying to change the industry, just trying to be a part of it. If you could change the world by doing one thing, what is something you would change right away? Okay, so this is a heavy one. To change the world. Well, look, I mean, has anybody noticed that if you get on social media, people tend to be a little bit mean? I think that people hide behind the computer too much these days, right? We're in this major digital world where people feel very safe getting behind their computers. And so, sometimes I'll often muse. I'm a child of the 80s, right? 80s, and grew up in the 90s as well, and just kind of old school in that I miss the days before social media even existed sometimes. Before we had smartphones and all these things. I think that people interacted maybe a little bit differently, and more personal interactions were necessary. And I think we lose that sometimes today in our current digital world. So I would say that that's one thing for me. But at the root of that, right? I mean, communicating digitally is not really a problem. The problem is respecting each other. And learning to respect differences of opinion and to have intelligent conversations, and not just making a point because you think you're right, or just defending your point constantly. Be willing to listen to people and what they are saying, and that maybe you could learn something. Maybe you are not right about something. I think that we need to have unity. I think that we need to learn to love each other. We need the love of God, frankly, in this country, in this world. And what I mean by that is, if you go to the story of Jesus Christ, right, who when an adulterous woman was brought before him, all the people said, this person has to be stoned because they're an adulteress. And Jesus said, well, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And one by one they left, because nobody's perfect. And the whole point of that is, regardless of what you believe, the whole point of that is that we can be imperfect, and we can be we can make mistakes, but we can still love each other, and we can still get along. So I guess that's my little soapbox message, since you asked such a heavy question. What's your favorite movie? All right, going a lot lighter here. And what's your favorite band? All right, so favorite movie. Look, I mean, I'm gonna cop out on this, because I know I can't narrow down one specific movie, but what I'm gonna go to are the movies that I would watch over and over and over again and love it. And that's some classic stuff like Liar Liar, like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, like The Three Amigos. But I also love stuff like The Avengers, right? Like I love the whole Infinity Saga, and Civil War, and Infinity War, and Endgame. That's all really fun stuff. And of course, Star Wars. I mean, heck. What's your favorite band? Favorite band? I'm going to go with an artist named Toby Mac. He's just got a lot of songs that are great. I mean, there's a few of them I'm not as crazy about. The more rock pop based songs that he has, not so much the rap versions, I like. And also another band called Owl City has a really cool sound. And incidentally enough, the two of them actually did a Christmas song together. So that's just extra cool. You should check it out. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but check that out. Recommend some sci-fi or fantasy. Sure. So, of course, first of all, I have to recommend my own book, right? Heroes of Time, Legends, Murdoch's Choice. Check that out. Otherwise, fantasy, I'm going to go with the Redwall series. Okay? If you haven't read the Redwall series, go read that, because it's warrior mice and badgers and ferrets and robins and all that good stuff. And how can you go wrong with that? Seriously. So go read the Redwall series. And as far as sci-fi, a really cool one is Old Man's War by John Scalzi. Check that one out. That's a very fun read. What's next for you writing and release-wise? Okay, so I mentioned there's a few things. First off is the sequel to Murdoch's Choice, which is being worked on right now, and that's probably the next thing I'll be able to publish. After that, at some point, will be the other entry point into the series, the epic fantasy series. That will be the book Heroes of Time, The First Ethereal, as the current title. So I don't know yet. That one's currently it's in beta reading status. You can actually apply to be a beta reader for that one, for whomever is interested, from my website. And that one is actually in review and critique with another famous big name author right now. I don't feel like I can say who that is. If I did say the name, everyone would recognize him. But I don't think I should say that yet. But he's got that. And after he's done with that and I finish edits, then that book will either go traditional publishing or I'll continue to do the self-publishing thing, which I'm not sure yet which one I'll do. But that's one of the next things coming up. And then also the children's book series, Penny Pangolin, that will be at some point in the future as well. Okay, so I mentioned I would do a little bit of a reading from my Candletide story. So this is an in-world holiday tale that I wrote here recently just for the holidays. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a little bit too long, I think, for this. But I'm going to read a chunk of it. And so for the background, real quick, Zale, this is Zale the Gale Murdoch. So this is the main character from Murdoch's Choice, Captain Zale the Gale Murdoch. He's actually sitting with his grandchildren in their house, and they are talking about the holiday Candletide, and he's about to read this story to them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, if I got it pulled up here and in the right place. Okay. Zale shifted his girth in the cushy chair, readying the makeshift storybook upon his lap. If half the stories of our voyages were recorded, as I someday hoped them to be, the pages would fill this house to the brim. This special tale of a Candletide past happened not so many years ago, and to get the full effect of the holiday, I wrote it in the form of a Candletide rhyme. Do you girls remember the gents who are part of Murdoch's mates? I think so, replied Fawn. There's your first mate, Dippy, right? That's right, very good. And Jigglegut, piped Sage. Zale chuckled. That would be Wigglebelly, our cook and a senior deckhand. Beep, chirped Nova. Ah, yes, said Zale. Old Beep, our boatswain. Then there's Quartermaster Fump, Master of Arms Chim Chum, Deckhand Hookney. Are those their real names? Asked Sage. Nope, those are their Murdoch's mates' monikers. On our ship, that's as good as their birth names. Oh, and there's Jensen, a greenhorn. That means he's still got much to learn. Zale paused. The name of Jensen made him think of Starlina. Jensen and Starlina had become very close throughout their youth, a relationship that anyone could see was going well beyond just friendship. These thoughts brought once again a longing to see Starlina. Is that all of your crew, Pop-Pop? Asked Fawn, pulling Zale from his reverie. By the light, no! We're nearly 36 strong, but I think that's all you'll need to know for this tale. He cleared his throat. So, without further ado, I give you the gift of Candletide. He flipped to the first page and began to read. On the trusty old Queenie one Candletide night, I emerged from my cabin to a wondrous sight. From the prow to stern to the rigging below, all the decks of my ship were covered in snow. Deckhands threw snowballs and the officers gawked. The ship's wheel was glittery, frozen, and locked. And then I saw Jensen slide down one of the rails, as both Beep and Chim struggled to steady the sail. Not a day earlier saw the deck swabbed by Fump, and the ice on the planks took me down with a bump. How my legs gave way as I fell to my butt, and Wigglebelly's sugar hams danced in my gut. I looked to the sky and gasped with a shiver, and realized we'd sailed right into a blizzard. When what to my old captain's eyes did appear, but a miniature ship throwing hooks at our rear. Grimkins! Cried my crew of those black-feathered fiends. Keep them off this ship, I yelled, whatever the means. But we didn't stop them from coming, they came. Somehow or other, those foes came just the same. I marched across the deck with a stomp of my boot, for I knew in that moment they were after our loot. And in moments like these, there is no time to be tame. So I looked to my crew, and I called them by name. Now Chim, to the weapons, the staves and the swords. Now Fump, to the crossbows, to fight off the horde. On Wigglebelly, ward them off with your girth. On Beep and on Dippy, make them regret their birth. And then came a jostle, a most unsettling sound, as our ships unexpectedly both ran aground. On an island we'd landed, as best we could look, we drifted into the western coast of Hallbrook. I took to the land to assess what I could, and pursued the Grimkin captain into the wood. It seemed for an hour I ran and gave chase, till the ground neath vanished, and I fell on my face. And then, in a moment, I heard within reach the shuffle of talons and a horrible screech. The Grimkin captain and I, we were trapped there together, in the woods, snow, ice, and extremely bad weather. I drew my saber, for I was prepared to fight, and Grimkins look meaner in the dark of the night. Then up we both looked at the sound of a bark, facing large clothed foxes, a beaver, an aardvark. Anthropods! We had fallen right into their trap. To protect their village, they had heard that trap snap. Then they hoisted us up, that Grimkin and I, and took us to shelter in a cave that was nigh. And there in that cave I saw my entire crew. Across the cavern stood the Grimkin crew too. As I stared at them all, confused and befuddled, my mind felt foggy and especially muddled. Then came a great badger, looking older than grief. I knew in a moment he must be the chief. And I glared at that beast, my temper quite sour, for we'd all been made captive in just the last hour. But that badger chief, being wiser than wise, smacked down his staff and he fixed me with his eyes. And he spoke with a voice that was raspy and torn, like one who gargles sharpish rocks every morn. Enough, he shouted, so that everyone turned. Your fighting is futile, and your pride be burned. You know it all, human. Have you any notion The reason these Grimkins caused all this commotion? Of course, I replied. They were after our bounty, and for it they would have happily drowned me. The old chief grunted, to his troops gave a whistle, and up came his staff just as fast as a missile. His staff pointed straight at my Grimkin foe's head. Well, human, you're wrong, that old chief badger said. Your crews were both fighting in that icy breeze, and I tell you now, you're both dumber than fleas. These Grimkins never cared to steal your great prize. Their ship was sinking. They were saving their lives. In the heart of that storm, they had sprung a bad leak. To be home for Candletide is all that they seek. But hate makes you humans and Grimkins quite blind. You fight when you meet and you all lose your minds. We are all creatures blessed by light from above. We can all be at peace, and we can all of us love. And there in that cave, because of this wizened beast, Grimkins, humans, anthropods, all had a great feast. We shared tales of great battles, tales of far places. We shared tales of triumph, treasures, and new faces. Oh, how we laughed! Fump sprayed food through his teeth, and the table we shared was round like a wreath. Wigglebelly danced until he lost his footing. His girth shook when he fell, like a bowl full of pudding. And some hours later, the storm finally ended. We took time to thank the creatures befriended. And of course, these Grimkins we could not leave alone, so we loaded their stuff and helped them sail home. Ne'er would we forget how that night the tides turned, nor the friends that we'd made and the lessons we'd learned. And from the decks of our ship was heard clear as a bell, Happy Candletide all, and may the winds fare ye well.